Yes, absolutely. Remind me when we get there, but yes. All right, anything else? Okay, moving on to public. Are there any members of the public in attendance who would like to address the board? Yes, okay. Anyone online who would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right along. And our first item under business requiring discussion is the environmental club. Thank you guys for being here, and they have a presentation for us on the screen.
We're gonna come over here if that's
Okay.
I'm gonna be winner and avoid anyone.
I didn't see you guys yet.
All right, hi, my name is Dahlia Foltz. My name is Allie Daigle. I'm Sadie Ross. My name is Yola Merrill.
I'm Sebastian Bugarski.
And we're the leaders of the Hanover Environmental Club. Thank you for having us tonight. This picture was taken at the Environmental Club's meeting with students from the Ray, RMS, and MCS schools. Brainstorm ideas on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at each school. We hope that this climate action plan will serve as a planning tool and a resource to inform the capital improvement plan, as it provides valuable baseline data specific to each school, as well as forecasted emission and reduction targets. Climate action plans are a strategy to help us measure our progress towards sustainability outcomes. We are very eager to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from HHS. This is a graph that shows carbon dioxide concentration in parts per million on the y-axis, and this is thousands of years ago, with 0 being present and this being 800,000 years ago. As you can see, carbon dioxide concentration has always fluctuated but remained below 300 parts per million until now, where we're at 422 parts per million. This puts us in completely uncharted territory. You can also see on this graph below that carbon dioxide and temperature have always tracked each other very closely. These are the 5 milestones for climate mitigation, and it's the process we are following to develop and implement the CAP. We have completed the first 3 milestones, which are inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, establishing reduction targets, and developing a climate action plan. And we are eager to work with the school board, administration, staff, and community to implement the greenhouse gas reduction measures outlined in the climate action plan. We are looking to the board for help with this next phase of implementation. This table of contents provides a brief overview of the contents of the CAP, beginning with an introduction, followed by science of climate change policies at the local, federal, and international levels, which is followed by the SAU 70 greenhouse gas current emissions, projected emissions, and reduction targets. Finally, district-wide reduction measures broken into priority, secondary measures. In the annexes, you will find the current greenhouse gas emissions, forecasted emissions, and reduction targets specific to each school based on their energy use data. This table is showing you the SAU greenhouse gas emissions in 2023, as well as emissions projected for the years in 2030 and 2050 in metric tons of CO2 equivalents. Most emissions are coming from the building energy sector, followed by employee commute and student commute. One can see that based on town population projections, emissions are expected to increase in a business as usual scenario. In this table, other is referring to school-sponsored travel at HHS. You can see that half of the emissions are under the jurisdiction of the SAU, of the district, and half are employee and student commute. The Environmental Club hopes to partner with the SAU on implementing measures to reduce emissions. We would like to emphasize that the CAP is a more comprehensive document with respect to carbon emissions than the energy audits which focuses solely on building energy, as it includes all energy consuming sectors. Also, this cap provides opportunity for student involvement and can serve as a valuable educational tool. The SAU greenhouse gas reduction targets are to achieve below 16% of the 2022-2023 school year levels by 2030, which is in the middle of that graph shown, and below 75% of the 2022-2023 school year levels by 2050, which is the end of the graph. These are consistent with the goals of the state of New Hampshire. These are the reductions deemed necessary by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to keep temperatures from exceeding a 2 degrees Celsius increase above pre-industrial levels. Emission limits show that we have to act quickly to meet these reduction targets. This table of student-generated ideas from all 4 schools shows the priority measures we encourage the district to implement to reduce emissions. For each of the 3 main contributing sectors, building energy, employee commute, and student commute, we have identified an implementation lead, the timing needed, and the relevant school to which it applies to. You can see that many of the measures have to be implemented at the facilities and school board levels. There are also secondary measures that are considered lower priority because of their limited ability to reduce emissions, but are still important for sustainability. Students have recommended some actions, like developing an app for carpooling or creating a program to sign up bikes during the school day instead of driving to nearby locations like the co-op.
As you continue through the CAP, you'll see there are baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventories, forecasted emissions, and reduction targets for each of the 4 schools in the district based on data unique to each building. This table shows the building energy emissions associated with the high school. The building's energy sector includes greenhouse gas emissions generated from electricity consumption and fossil fuel consumption at each school within SAU 70, and transportation for wood chips for HHS. The greenhouse gas emissions include only anthropogenic sources. Building energy emissions associated with electricity use for all 4 schools is scaled based on the renewable portfolio of New Hampshire and Vermont electric grids.
The high school data shows that roughly 40% of our emissions are coming from building energy, while 60% are coming from travel, including student commute, employee commute, and other travel. Comparing the 4 schools, the greatest reductions should come from the high school, as its emissions are half of the total SAU amount, and ours are 1,500, while the total is 3,000 about. Our suggestions are that the schools provide EV charging stations for the staff. In a 2019 survey of staff, when asked, would you be more inclined to buy an electric car, knowing that there would be a charging station at HES, 50% of the respondents said yes. 2, to get more students to ride electric school buses. This is a campaign that could be organized by the Environmental Club. 3, focus on electrifying the school and procuring that energy from renewable sources. 4, work with Sustainable Hanover to identify programs in New Hampshire that provide renewable energy to its customers. 5, implement the recommendations included in the building energy audits. 6, we also recommend that the district employ a sustainability coordinator who can monitor progress over time as these measures are implemented and our greenhouse gas emissions decline. This is step 5 of the 5 milestones for climate mitigation. By monitoring implementation of greenhouse gas reduction measures at each school, the district will be able to serve as a leader among educational institutions on how schools can take the responsibility for their carbon emissions in a way that includes all the stakeholders: facilities, staff, students, administration, the school board, and the larger school community.
Finally, we would like to thank Hannah Kornfeld for serving as our volunteer consultant for the last 7 years. She has led us through the process of first creating a CAP for the high school, and in the past 3 years has guided us through the process of developing this SAU CAP, has performed all the modeling, and contributed substantially to the editing. We'd also like to thank Dr. Bottoms for his unwavering support of the Environmental Club's efforts and bring this CAP to fruition. And we are so grateful that we printed out a hard copy.
Thank you so much.
The Environmental Club is asking the school board to take action by formally adopting this SAU Climate Action Plan. We would also ask that you schedule a special SAU board meeting on the same day as the Dresden board meeting on Tuesday, April 22nd, Earth Day, to speak to your decision regarding adoption of this climate action plan and consideration for the sustainability coordinator position. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Before you guys disappear, I think board members may have some questions for you guys.
I have a question about the travel portion. Does that include travel for team sports?
Yes, that was the other.
Okay, thank you. And how is that, did you keep that separate from, arch intensive travel?
It's not separate in here. We have the data.
Okay, so march intensive is not part of this.
It is.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay,
But they have it disaggregated, so.
Yeah, we have it broken.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Jay?
Thank you so much. I couldn't be happier. What a great job. And, I think we also have to recognize Jeannie Kornfeld, Linda Dante, Deb Robinson, who've also in their work with the Environmental Club have been, big supporters of this work. What you've done for us is helped us, live up to a promise we made to the Hanover community and the Norwich community when the taxpayers, the voters approved, I think it was 2 years ago, a warrant article that expressed this board's commitment to sustainability. And, you've done the work for us. I mean, I can't thank you enough. This is great. We'll be looking at a policy that sort of goes along with this later this evening. And what I would tell the board is, I think the club's request to adopt this policy is a very reasonable one. And I would never ask a board to do that after just seeing it without some analysis to figure out what sorts of commitments are embedded in the plan. But I do know that our students have been very careful to include language like we're fiscally responsible, giving the board the out if there's some sort of a serious financial consideration to sort of limit any of the actions under the plan. But I don't see a whole lot of high cost items in there. I think a lot of what you're proposing makes a lot of sense and is doable. So it's just gonna take us following their lead. So just again, thank you so much.
And I should have said thank you too. My apologies.
Any other questions, Neil?
Two questions. One, just very specific about what was in the report. I noticed that transportation ranks sort of among the highest of the things that are contributing to the problem. Yet in the recommended solution, I guess my question is, in the transportation line item, does that include our busing service?
Student transportation, yeah.
So school buses are included in the student.
Jamie, do you want to come up a little?
So that's
closer?
what's contributing
Sorry.
to the relative high ranking of transportation for students.
Yes,
And then, so then to take that next step further, when I look at the recommendations, there was no recommendation about electric busing.
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, so we recently have, I've learned 2 electric school buses that are gonna be coming to this district in, 2 years? A year?
Hanover.
1 to 2 years,
Right.
yeah. So so we have not accounted for those in our numbers because at that time we didn't have that information.
No, I guess where I'm going is, I didn't see it, so there was this whole table of priority reduction measures.
Mhm.
And in the transportation section, in the student commuting section, electric buses wasn't listed. I was just curious,
I think
as a reduction strategy, sorry.
I thought there was a separate line for student commuting, meaning individual transportation, and there's a separate line for
Yes.
bus.
For buses, yeah,
Okay, all right, so I just missed it. Okay,
yeah.
okay, sorry. And then the second question is, if you had a limited amount of money, what's the priority? Where should it go first?
The buildings. How we source our energy and finding the best and most sustainable way to do it.
Other questions from board members first? Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Yes, if there are any comments related to this item from the audience, we would take those as well. Just to be clear, addressing the board, if we want to bring them in, we can, but yes.
And do you,
Please introduce yourself.
yeah, for people who are on Zoom, they're just getting, can they hear me just
Yes.
fine?
Yes, they can, yes.
Okay. My name is Linda Gray and I've been on the Norwich Energy Committee since 2008. So I have just several points. One is appreciate the student work. I think their report is great. It gives you great information. I do want to point out that I believe this has been in development for multiple years. And the key thing is that you have to follow up on the implementation recommendation, because these reports, you are no different than any other entity around the entire state of Vermont. There have been so many reports and climate action plans over the last 20 years that it makes me cry. And so you have to move past the let's look at this report and examine it. You have to move into implementation. So their recommendation, if you end up deciding that you can't afford an actual sustainability coordinator, at least pull together a functioning committee to ensure that it gets going and that certain assignments go to people already on staff to do it. And I know I served on the school board for about 10 years, late 90s into the 2000s. And so I know that it's very difficult. You have to just focus on all the education tasks that you have is enough. But this is really crucial and you've got to pay attention to it. It's very important. And the other thing is if you do this stuff, you will save money.
Yeah. That's the key, right? Implementation. Yeah.
So my name is Judy Paula and I am co-chair of Sustainable Hanover with Yolanda Baumgartner. And I just want to extend our support. We sent a letter, but I just want to say personally, thank you to the Environmental Club and to Jeannie Kornfeld, and to let them know that they have our support, and we would be happy to have representation on a committee if you don't hire a coordinator, or even if you do, maybe that coordinator would like a committee to support that person. We just are here to be supportive as you implement this plan. We're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just because I know we're on the verge of putting our budget before the voters. We're talking about a future budget, and the FTE need that the club is recommending is a fractional FTE. It's not an entire employee in that role. It's somebody who would have this as a part-time role.
Great. Anyone else on the board?
I just have a question about that.
Did you recognize me? Yes, you are. You are so very recognized.
I know at one time, the town of Hanover, I'm sort of looking at Judy, because you probably know the answer to this. And I'm not suggesting you don't, but at one time Hanover had a full-time sustainability person, or did they share it with the college, or?
At one point, we had a part-time sustainability person, and we are about, and I think I can say that we have just extended an offer to someone for a full-time position.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to piggyback and maybe 50-50 with someone in the town?
But that's a wonderful partnership at
It
the
is.
very least. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Can you come a little closer?
Shannon Koch, teacher. I'm here to support the Students Environmental Club. I think it's important. I think it's just what we should be working towards as students, fostering that leadership. I think they're doing the hard work. Teachers are busy. I'm on sabbatical this year, so I'm getting that view, eagle's eye view. So I really want to echo the support for the sustainability coordinating position, to really help foster more student leadership opportunities, to really keep their eye on that ball. Because with everything else going on, it's, hard to say it's another thing that teachers are gonna pick up and really make noticeable change.
Thank you, Shannon. And I will just say, for anyone who hasn't actually had a chance to look at the physical report, it is beautiful. It is of professional quality. It's very well done. So again, kudos, guys. It's beautiful. Anyone else on this matter? Anyone online? No? Okay. Thank you again, guys, so much. Yeah, Jeannie?
I'll just gonna turn this off, so.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, thank you again. We will move on. It's not back to follow here, but we're gonna move into reading of policies.
Oh, boy. I think we'll start with sustainability since most of you may not be interested. So
I love a good transition.
yes,
Yeah.
work on those segues.
Mhm.
So for those of you looking at, this is an A policy, meaning it's aspirational, is not to the level of granularity that this great cap was. And it does reference a cap. And like Jay mentioned, we're not going to look for approvals from that folks that may not have read in great detail. But in this policy, which is on a second read, we want to adopt, implement, and maintain an SAU 70 climate action plan, as well as several other things, again, that are fairly generic in nature due to this particular policy level. We did consult with Linda, Dante, and Jeannie Kornfeld and their many students on this as well. So they've seen various iterations of it. Went through policy unanimously, and we're hoping to have a good discussion tonight on anything that folks want to talk about.
Questions or comments? Yeah,
So you say this is a second read of this?
It is.
In this reading, this first read. I guess it's aspirational. So those initial bullet points seem kind of, some of them redundant or covering the same material, but in different ways. Like they talk about the third bullet, develop, maintain, and provide environmental sustainability learning, such as, and then the next bullet is about sustainability in the context of the curriculum. I don't know if the curriculum is different than learning, but it's not clear to me, and they seem like they should be one bullet perhaps. I don't know if I guess if it's a second one, I don't want to get it, but it just seems very sort of amorphous and comprehensive in the same at the same time, if that's possible. And I mean, I'm not opposed to any of the ideas in theory. I just don't know what they seem like commitments, but it's an aspirational policy. So maybe that's what's appropriate in an aspirational policy because it's not actually committing you, even though it sounds like a commitment. So I don't know how to take it, I guess.
So I'll do my best to answer various aspects of that. First, with the amorphous thing, part of that is by design in the sense that this is a science-based thing that may change over time as knowledge changes and what we learn about what we can do as an institution, as an SAU, and as individual schools. So part of it's to reflect that what may be essential in 5 years may not be known now or may have changed within that time period. In terms of the aspects of the curriculum versus learning, the curriculum is stuff that's actually taught within the classroom for specific topics or embedded within certain classes that are not necessarily environmentally facing on its surface, but might have some aspect like a particular book or something like that. While learning could be things outside of the classroom and outside of the specific curriculum. So they are intended to be two separate topics where learning would encapsulate the curriculum.
I wonder, and again, apologies to, I'm sort of in the same boat as Tony here. I wonder if creating a definition section and pulling out those two paragraphs on sustainability might make it a little more readable, just because then you have action items, right? Ensure equitable access, develop, maintain, and provide, and everything else is sort of action oriented. So I'm wondering if that's part of what's making it feel a little heavier there, is that those other two bullet points kind of read more as definitions. not changing the content, but maybe just the
Definitional things in
organization.
the beginning of it.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
Could you phrase that suggestion in motion language? We could we could draw out the definition bullets and just put them under a subheading for definitions.
Sure. Yeah. Other comments or thoughts on this? I guess I'll just ask one more question as the administrator who's ultimately responsible for implementing this. Does it feel like a policy that you can translate into action?
Armed with this, I can.
And now you have a beautiful print copy to
Yeah,
on your website.
absolutely.
Any other comments on this? Comments from the public? Yes. ma'am.
I guess I would just say it doesn't feel like an overarching policy. It feels like some very
Guidance.
specific promises. And so I just read it thinking, how are we going to keep those promises? Right? And what does it mean for future budgets and whatnot? So if I was one of our constituents and I said they approved this policy, I'd be like, okay, so what are these 15, 16 bullets happening? Right?
Sort of the stoplight,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
This
where.
seems
we
very
go.
prescriptive as far as what we need to do. And so I just want to make sure if we're adopting it, everybody is on the same page that it is a pretty prescriptive plan for how to make progress on these.
So I would say is that it used to be far more so, and the policy committee toned down a lot of the rhetoric that was initially in there by some of our stakeholders. And also in terms of two things, one, avoiding where it's getting too granular, like there were things in there about certain types of toilets and certain types of pipes, like that got very granular. And we wanted to pull it back from that. That's more of the R version, which for those watching is more of the regulatory. How do you actually do it on the ground floor? Really nitty gritty stuff, which policies deliberately do not go into. That's more of an administration piece. And so it has been toned down quite a bit. And secondly, we wanted to keep it vague, to not commit ourselves to that. There's caveats in here for financial issues or logistical issues, some contractual stuff as well. But we felt that policy that it was not so prescriptive that it was implausible. And it was generic enough to be, this is what we want to do. And now we're going to give it to the administration for how they're going to do it budgetarily, logistically, et cetera.
With attribution to our astute advisors for the environmental club, you'll notice the very first sentence ends with a term, while being fiscally responsible. And that's repeated in other places as well. And I'm the proud parent of a graduate from the very last class of Green Mountain College. And I still wear my T-shirt from Green Mountain College, which says Green Mountain College, first in sustainability. We have to consider financial sustainability as well. And that's why that's referenced in here. And as this board and future boards make decisions around investments in sustainability, they're going to have to balance that aspect of it. In the case of Green Mountain College, they've made a lot of investments in buying down their emissions and ultimately weren't fiscally sustainable. There's a cautionary tale there. And I think we just need to be aware that we can, and as one person mentioned, we can actually save money by a lot of the things that we're contemplating. I'll just use probably the most pressing one, which this is part of my report later, but one of the things we've all acknowledged is one of the most pressing facility issues that we have ahead of us is replacing roofs. Well, about 6 years ago, I think, I just started here. We had some proposals for installing rooftop solar RMS, and there were even some discussion of having carports with solar arrays on them. But we ended up going all the way down the road of RFPs and getting solicitations for bids, and only to realize that we couldn't do it until we replaced the roof. Well, now we're on the verge of replacing roofs. And so we have a real opportunity to actually do some of these projects, build them in and try to do it in a way that makes sense for us financially. So that's just one example. I think there will be other opportunities for us as some of the components of our building reach the end of their useful life to then replace those things with sustainable alternatives.
I'm wondering, because the policies have categories, are there other districts, SAUs in New Hampshire that are further along in this regard than we are, who have developed policies? And, I mean, I know some have what you were just describing, the carport with the solar panels on top for the buses, but is this sort of new territory, developing this sustainability policy?
Connect here for this one. Do you remember Karen from that conversation?
Or and the environmental club may know that as well.
So what was the question?
You guys have any model districts that have already adopted?
I mean, don't forget, I think if you were to move the sustainability in the context, I mean, it was built around the strategic plan, right? Obviously, facilities, operations and curriculum. So I think if you were to move the definition of sustainability, to your point, up, at the end of the day, I think this was really just meant to give the board direction that when we're analyzing things, and I'll go back to like our Norwich budget last year, where we were looking at a whole host of options for the heating system, weatherization. And, Jamie did a very good job through that group that came in, that gave us, here's the options, here's the costs, and here's the potential savings. We were all looking at things both in dollar savings as well as CO2 savings, right? That was one of the things that we were looking at. And ultimately we came into the middle because we went with the LP and some weatherization stuff, and we did not go with the $7 million, what was it? The drilling into the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Was it
The geothermal
the geothermal system? We decided that was just, out of it was just not fiscally responsible to go that route. But I would envision that, a long story, long-winded way of saying that if this policy would have driven that discussion. Not that this is committing anybody to anything.
Or something to refer back to when we have decisions.
Well, as I said, like I said, I think at the last meeting, I think some of this also just makes sure, and whether we have a sustainability person here, that I just found out this week that my wife threw it, was she like, what, this metal spoon came from your school? And the kid's like, no, they're all plastic there. We don't have any metal spoons at the school. So I mean, there's things like that. That's like, why are we not spending a little extra money to do these things, right? Doesn't have to be $7 million on it. So I don't know, I think it would just, is to put a policy like this in place, maybe move those 2 points up. At the end of the day, this is kind of giving people some context. I don't think it's committing anybody to do anything other than to do the right, like to consider all these things when we're making decisions.
Jay, go ahead.
And I would also pat our kids on the back again, because I think they're out front on this. I don't think there are a lot of public school systems that have climate action plans in place, certainly not in our neighborhood. And I mean, you couldn't have a better first run.
I mean, most of these things make sense in the long term, because whoever in the audience was, it's like, when we were looking at the stuff in Norwich, it actually made sense to spend a little bit more money to do a few more things, because the 10-year savings was like, which is the same thing that's gonna happen with our solar and our roofs and stuff, like, we should be doing all that stuff at the same time, the windows, like,
I see one hand, yes.
I'm not positive.
Sorry, can you,
my
come
name-
and introduce yourself?
My name is Honor Passo, and I believe the Oyster River School District has made tremendous progress. I'm not sure if they had a plan to do it with, and I don't know that if any students were involved. But I've talked to another superintendent in Sunapee, and he was totally impressed with how they've been able to move forward with actions like this in Oyster River District.
It's great to know. Thank you. Thank you. All right, if there are no further comments on this, I will move us into our next. I love when a meeting has a nice trajectory. This is all very related. So our final item under business requiring discussion is the capital improvement plan and strategic plan update, which I imagine will have some elements of this as well.
Really? Are we okay with all the other policies?
Oh,
Yeah.
I like this better. Okay, next policy. Keep that in mind.
So-
Pause.
That was very smooth.
Right?
I had to tap you. Actually. The other ones are not
Feeling so
fun.
good there, Ben. Okay.
So this is to deal with current political environment stuff, to put it mildly.
Yeah, no, I want to do the other thing.
Yeah.
but I'm just kidding. Keep going.
So due to the changes with Title IX definitions and the fact that both the feds and the state are aligned on things that we did not wish them to be aligned on. And after repeated discussion with legal, we need to retire the current versions that we approved a few months ago for ACAA and ACAB and ACAB and our versions, and replace them with the prior versions that we retired last August. So this did not come from policy. This came straight from legal due to the timing of it all. And I don't think anyone was thrilled, but I also don't think there's any way around it.
And for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read through in the public or on the board, we are, first off, certainly not the only district
Yeah.
that recently enacted change that is now having to change back because there were new recommendations that came into effect in 2024 that went into our policies subsequent to that, and now they're swinging back the other direction. And so they are in fact recommending that we revert to the 2020 requirements quickly without subsequent results. Just to give a context.
And with one other note, both folks on the board and or in the public may have concern about specific policies that are not mentioned here. We are not discussing anything but these two policies. Everything else we're hold strong on for as long as we are legally able to do so.
I'll take board comments first and then I'll go to the public.
I really struggle with this. And, you know, I looked at the Drummond Woodson piece and it says,
Which is our law firm.
yes, I'm sorry, you're just clarifying. Yes, I knew that. The Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. And I think we could all agree that there is a lot that's going on that is up for potential litigation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when it says that a federal court vacated the rules, is that I mean, I find myself wondering what federal court vacated the rules, at what level is it? And maybe it doesn't matter. You could tell me that. But it really distresses me to vote to remove our concern for gender identity and sexual orientation. Now, I understand that our previous policy did not result in any discrimination against students based on gender and sexual identity. And so one could well argue that going back to something we had is prudent, might save the district money. In the case of a court case, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to understand why we have to do this so speedily. That's one question I have. The other question I have is about the potential for litigation for people who want us to keep the policy we currently have in place.
So I would just say, and then I think Jay will probably say something very similar, but my understanding is that this is purely a legal definition of what Title IX now covers, not a statement on what we as a board or as a school district support or wish to emphasize in our own school district, but simply a definition, a legal definition of what is now protected under this one particular definition of Title IX. That's my understanding, which does not necessarily alleviate your concerns, but
no,
yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. We can't make our own version of federal law. And unfortunately, they've changed Title IX or reverted it back to what it was before they made the change that added gender identity. There were a couple other protected classes that were included too, that I think are no longer listed. So even if we maintained it, if we had a Title IX claim that advanced, they wouldn't apply our definition of Title IX
Right.
because it's a federal law.
In terms of, other fixed classes and things that you refer to, all of our other policies are holding.
Okay, okay. It's just a matter of conscience for me, and I'll leave it at that.
You're probably
Thanks,
gonna.
Priscilla.
Sorry, I missed the policy meeting when we talked about this. I think that what I hear in Deb's question is that this isn't just about a definition, right? That this is also implied in the terms that are in the document, right? So it's when we're talking about if like women are protected, if gender is protected, if, you know, I'm thinking about the original purpose of Title IX, which was about like, you know, making sure that whatever, equal access, exactly. By removing this to accord with federal law, we're essentially agreeing that trans people or trans women aren't women, or trans men aren't men. They exist in one of those protected classes, right?
So again, I would just say, for the purposes of this policy, we are saying that there is a specific, call it narrow, but definition of what is covered under Title IX.
And our other policies aren't changing.
Which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, so when we get a claim, we evaluate it to determine whether or not it's a Title IX claim. So it's gonna change our assessment of whether or not if a Title IX claim is brought to us by a person who is transgender, it will probably impact our analysis of whether a Title IX claim exists. It will not change our determination as to whether a harassment claim exists. So if it's not a Title IX harassment, that doesn't mean that, given our definitions that we have for non-Title IX harassment, we still have the people involved would still have recourse.
I think I understand, but I still think that it's a little bit like saying, sky over there is blue, and sky over there is blue. This no longer acknowledges that this sky is blue. And so now we all have to pretend that it's another color, right?
Or there's no color at all.
Watch your news.
Yeah.
Can I, the risk of not adopting the change. Is it loss of federal funding? Is it lawsuit? Is it both? Is it more?
I mean, I'm not an attorney. I'm not practicing without a license. But no matter what we call it, like a claim is going to be measured against Title IX, the federal law. And we could say that we recognize this now former definition, but it doesn't have any basis in law anymore. So no matter what we think or feel, it's the law.
Okay,
and so
I get it.
yeah,
I get it.
and I don't know that there's.
I think what board members, what has been repeated in this discussion multiple times, right, is that other policy in this area, this board has adopted, is not changing. These, which reference federal law, are. We need to be, but, and, I think the distinction is important. Especially when it comes to the core values of this board and this community, those are not changing.
Well, point of order, I guess, or clarification, in looking at the policies that we have in the agenda tonight, I'm just wanting to make sure those are in fact the right versions that we are now needing to revert to. Because I do still see mention of gender identity, sexual orientation. Again, just wanting to make sure that if our interest is reverting to the federal definitions, that we have the proper policy in here. Yep,
There are references in here to New Hampshire law too. So I'm not sure what the status of law and whether things are being revised at the state level in this area, but gender identity has been identified in the non-discrimination laws of New Hampshire. So I don't know if that's being changed as well. We'll continue to monitor that, but,
so my question is purely when we're asked to
Yeah.
vote, do we have the right thing to vote on?
No, so I think what we're seeing in the packet tonight are the ones to be retired,
No.
not the.
No,
These are the ones unretiring.
yes, so, yeah, Tony.
So I just pulled up the current policy because I had the same concern.
Mhm.
The current, the words that I see missing from the ones we're looking at that were in the policy adopted in August 2024 are sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy or related conditions. Those are no longer, like
That's one of the
prior
differences,
version,
yeah.
version we're considering today does not have those terms. That's the difference. I'm just looking at them right now.
Can you, sorry, say that again?
So the terms that are missing from the policy we're looking at tonight.
Yeah.
From the existing policy are sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy or related conditions. I believe familial stuff, no, that's still there. Those are the ones that I'm not seeing, and somebody could do a closer look.
So it does seem to me, and I definitely want to take the public comment as well, but it does seem to me that we may want to wait to vote on this until March 11th, just to make sure that we are in fact making the right changes to be in compliance with legal requirements. Does that sound right to everyone? I mean, we can revert to this one, but if it's not the right legal status, then I don't know if there's a point to doing that.
So there could be just sort of an uploading issue, which documents upload. We can talk to
Yeah.
Ryan about that, but the intent is basically the changes we made in August. We need to undo and go back to our previous version, which I think is what this actually is showing.
I understand that. It makes me uncomfortable to vote on something I haven't seen. It's our policy, I mean, personally, but Tony, go ahead.
Well, I wonder the same thing, just because this legal letter talks about
Gender identity.
particularly gender identity and sexual orientation and the definition of sex under Title IX is what was at issue. And so the inclusion of them is surprising to me. I'm happy to see them in there.
Right.
But if we're trying to describe in our policy what Title IX is, I think we should be sure that we are in fact reflecting what the current guidance on Title IX.
Jay, your thoughts on the timing of this? Can we push it back to March 11th?
I don't see why not.
It's only 3 weeks
Yeah.
away, not even, yes, 3 weeks.
Just to double check. make sure we
Nothing's
got it.
hard,
I mean,
sorry.
we could simply say we're gonna implement the advice given to us by our legal counsel.
And bring it back, yeah.
So.
I think that, one of my concerns is that, if this is about being in compliance with federal law and the other policies aren't changing, at what point, if there are more federal, if the federal law changes further, at what point does the board decide not to be in compliance?
So again, maybe I misspoke. I don't think it's a question of compliance, and I know I use that word. I think it is a legal definition of what the federal definition of Title IX is. And our other policies for the functioning of our district are not defining Title IX. They are our functioning policies for our district. Yeah, I think if we get to the point where that is something that we are being forced to change, that's potentially a different conversation. Would be and that's just me guessing in that direction. Would you like to, yes, would you like to continue? Please come forward and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tara Della Croce. I'm a parent of a sophomore at Hanover High. Thank you for having us. This is my first school board meeting, so happy to be here. It's run very differently than corporations. But we don't have the same rich conversation. I will just leave it at that. I think I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll leave it with this. And to me, it comes down to two things. If the school board votes to revert back to the previous policy, is it because we feel we are forced to? Or we feel like that's what we need to do on behalf of all of our students, not just certain students versus others? So that's one piece. So getting more time, thank you, to me, that is my opportunity to get more educated. So that's one side of it, and I think the other thing I would ask the board too is to have a articulate way to speak to students, parents, folks in the community of if we were to vote, if you were to vote to revert back to the original policy, why? Because federal law is obviously important, knowing public school systems and how reliant we are on it, but we also have a community that needs to be protected. And one policy changes, what's not to say that 3 more down the line will change, because we just set a precedent. Thanks.
Thank you. Other members of the public who'd like to comment on this?
I just had a question for policy people or something to consider before March 6th. So some of these, one of the policies is student sex discrimination, harassment, and Title IX complaint procedure, ACA. And there's R1. So part of these policies talk about Title IX, what is harassment under Title IX, what is sexual harassment under Title IX, how do you file a claim under Title IX coordinator, et cetera. That, to me, we don't want to mislead the public about what's considered a Title IX complaint, and that should be accurate and should reflect federal law. There is also generic language about defining harassment and sexual harassment, which in the text is defined broadly as if it's the same as what Title IX says it is. So I wonder if we can define harassment, sexual harassment, and say, for under Title IX, this is what it constitutes, or this is what could be a claim.
Additionally.
Which is separate from what the board may consider as a policy matter, harassment and sexual harassment. May not have the same remedies available. But to just to be clear that here's what's covered under Title IX, because somebody might be curious what's covered under Title IX, and we don't want to mislead them. Which is sort of separate from what the school considers policy.
A good suggestion.
I will point out that given the timing of this, that actually I don't think we have a policy meeting until after that March 11th meeting due to the elections and work travel and other things.
So I think part, and I guess I would, as the acting chair, if I may issue a sort of a directive, is not to redo the policy for the next meeting, but make sure that we have the language that we need to be able to put an appropriate definition of Title IX in front of the board, if that makes sense, right? Sure. And at that point, I think people can, we can rehash this conversation because we'll have a new board at that point, right? And we can, people can vote their conscience as they need to, but at least then we'll have the proper definition in front of us. Does that make sense to everyone? So we'll table that vote. Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just also
I'm so sorry.
My name is Alka Dev. I'm also the parent of a sophomore. And I don't really have, I also need to get more up to date on the specific language of the policy, but I guess one of the questions I have is around, I know that at least as far as Hanover is concerned, that there's a lot of engagement from the students around the changes and what happens in governance, in terms of governance of the school system. So I'm just curious, like, is this something that students have any say in? Do they actually have the right to speak on this as a group and a community? And if so, like, what does that look like? Because I mean, it was amazing to hear this environmental club come and present. So I'm just sort of getting a sense of how students get engaged with school board business.
It's a great point and a good question. I will let Jay respond. I will just again point out, and we all know that legal opinions and changes in definitions have been coming fast and furious, and it's getting like a fire hose, right? So our entertaining of this tonight was upon legal advice that you need to make this change immediately. And I personally feel comfortable pushing that to March 11th, since we'll have a new board at that point, since we can, get the proper wording at least in front of us. I think that makes sense, and I'm personally very comfortable waiting those 2.5, 3 weeks. But that is kind of where this, like, we have to make this change is coming from. So just wanted to put that out there. Jay?
Yeah, I just said there are all sorts of opportunities for student voice, and for anyone in the public to protest these changes, but the changes are made. And there was a lawsuit, that I believe this court decision stems from a lawsuit that occurred before the election even that was over. We got a warning from Vermont when we made these changes to bring it up to the 2024 changes. We were advised by the state of Vermont not to change our policy because this other lawsuit was going to be coming before the courts, and the court may very well strike the elements that are now, that we're reverting back away from. So we were told to hold and not even make that adoption, but we chose to move ahead because in New Hampshire that they weren't subject to that lawsuit. We can say anything we want, but in terms of like this particular decision, it's a federal law. So even if we said, oh, we're going to disregard that and we're going to take a claim from a transgender student and run it through the process so that ultimately it ends up in the Office of Civil Rights, they're just going to reject it. It's because it doesn't apply. And I think to Tony's point, I think we need to inform people about that. When we do have the vote on this policy, we should probably have some statement that accompanies it. I think that'd be a good thing to do. And like many people have mentioned already, we have other policies and definitions of harassment that come from state law that I feel confident today that we can still protect all of our students. I'm not, going beyond today, given the way changes are happening at the state level as well. I don't know what'll happen if they start changing those state laws. You as a board may have a situation where either you make a statement through a resolution if you choose to do so, like we've done on other issues. But ultimately, if we do have a situation that ends up in court, the courts are going to rule on what is prevailing law at the time.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us have been saying sort of the same thing different ways, and I will admit it took me a while to wrap my head around this, but Tony's right and Jay is right, but I want to point out two things. One is the policy changes that we're considering tonight. I view this as a way of letting the public know that if they wanted to bring a Title IX complaint against the school, this is the criteria that complaint needs to meet. So that's the reason for the change in our policy, because our policy on this says this is the criteria and the process for a Title IX complaint. I also want to make sure that board members go back and take a look at our policy AC, because I think that's the important one here. And I'm just going to read one sentence out of the second paragraph, which says, as described above, the blanket prohibition afforded under this policy as well as other board policies reflects, but goes further than some of the same protections afforded under multiple state and federal statutes or regulations. Y'all need to just go back and reread policy AC, because I know you did it a couple nights ago, but you forgot about it. So go back and do it again. Read policy AC.
I also wanted to address a part of your question about student participation. And there's a council and a member of council is elected each year to serve not on the SAU board, but she serves, in this instance, it's Ella, serves on the Dresden board, and we meet tomorrow. And as part of the students' responsibility, they bring to council some agenda items, not all of them. She's released from budget discussions, but she takes responsibility for bringing student concerns and student issues to the Dresden School Board and also reporting back to students about decisions that are made. So she is a really good person to have in the conversation as it moves forward.
All right, I was just looking to see if
Linda has her.
Linda has her hand up. Linda, hi, Linda. I was looking to see if this is on tomorrow night's Dresden agenda.
It is.
I'm also, actually a council executive, so I work with the students on council, but there actually is a very active group of students on the, equity committee that came out of council, and they're meeting, actually looking at ways to, I think support students, all students, but to get language and action steps. Now that things are changing very rapidly. So, there's a very focused effort. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk with you at some point. If you contact them, they know my email, but I can also reach out to you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Linda. So I will just point out to board members and administration as well that this is on our agenda for tomorrow night as well. So I don't know if we could get those changes or the appropriate language up for tomorrow night's meeting, and if we could perhaps vote it there. I don't want to get into the debate about which board should approve policies first. I know that's a lengthy discussion as well. Get my colleague down at the end of the table. Okay. If there's nothing else on this for tonight, then we will move into business. Oh, no, skipping ahead again. Now we can talk about the capital improvement plan and strategic plan update.
I gotta find my way back to the agenda.
Sorry. There was, I did not see a document.
There is not a document. There is, you'll see an administrative content. Sorry, I somehow lost board doc.
I don't think we have anything in administrative content.
Yes, we do.
We do. That's the, I do.
Yes.
I do not know. That's easy. Then signed up. That's okay. Did I get through?
You guys signed up.
Oh, I did read that.
Okay.
I thought there was a attachment that I missed.
That's for the real addicts.
Yeah, at the risk of being really redundant. I'm gonna be addressing more of this in my superintendent's report, but as far as the capital improvement plan and the strategic plan update, David Epstein and Stephen Poston from Truex Collins are gonna be here on March 6th and 7th. They're gonna be visiting our buildings, doing a walkthrough, and then they're gonna meet for about an hour with each of our principals. This will be like the initial phase of the sort of streamlined capital improvement plan that the board approved. Pursuing. In preparation for the work, Jamie and I have granted them or obtained for them access to the facility condition assessments that Bureau Veritas did for us. They were impressed by the depth of that database. The problem that we've seen statewide with that facility condition assessment work is that the prices are sort of all over the place and not accurate for our area. So one of the first things they're going to be doing is making sure that the costs that have been assigned to those various needs that have been identified in the FCA are updated. So they'll knock that out. They also are going to be using our new climate action plan as a reference document, which we've already had that conversation with David and Stephen, and they have access to it now too. So that'll be super helpful. And as I mentioned in my comments earlier during the presentation, I use the example of our roof situation. We've all had at least a verbal conversation about that being one of the things that's probably most pressing in terms of our building needs. And that has a direct link to our ability to install solar. So that's sort of where we are on the climate action plan. I mean, I'm getting my plans mixed up on the capital improvement plan. And we tried to do it over break, but we just couldn't line up schedules. Principals are taking vacation, and so it's gonna have to wait till next week. So that's it. That's all I have on the capital improvement plan.
Great. And strategic plan, If you want to wait till your
Well,
superintendent's report.
rather
that's
than
fine.
waiting, I'll just move right on into it. So I shared earlier at another meeting with the board, probably a couple times, that in terms of strategic planning, we are, I almost see every day somebody working on some aspect, some strategy of the plan. Today, there was a meeting, we have a partnership right now where half a dozen or so of our teachers are working with a professor from Dartmouth on educational design. And they're doing a project analyzing our provision of special education services and what's working well, what's not working so well. And we had a session today where we sort of went through and prioritized all that data that they've gathered. And my parting words to the group were that, okay, this is great. You're identifying some great strategies for making our student support part of the plan even stronger. And so there'll be some strategies that'll be generated from that work. In terms of the rest of it, this is one of the strategies that we've identified, part of the goals under facilities, and it's coming to fruition. It's like we're clicking things off. But what's happening now is we're working through these strategies that have been identified, and then what? And so I think I shared with the board that we're having an administrator retreat. They're all working individually in their buildings, doing two things. First, they're going back, reflecting on progress made so far, and then documenting the progress on the existing strategies that they've identified on the school by school basis. And then starting to put together that list of things that they need to do to move the work forward. So in April, they will generate essentially next steps to take us the next 3 to 5 years out. And they'll be preparing that so that you have it for your retreat in May. And I would ask that would be one of our agenda items, is to review that work and get ready to move this thing forward.
And they'll be joining us, right?
If the board wishes, I'd love to have them have one of those, have everybody get together, at least for a portion of it. So I mean, I can hit some of the high points here. Robin and I we worked with the administrative team to come up with a new administrator rubric for evaluation and supervision. We implemented it. We're in year 2 of it right now. We've made some revisions. And out of that evaluation work, we actually updated the staff survey that we give to the teachers and the support staff to evaluate the principals. And so now those things are totally aligned. We took a few items that were redundant and a couple that we didn't think people would have a reference point to give a useful response. So we chopped maybe 2 items out of that survey. And have that all updated and ready to use. I've updated the surveys and they're ready to go out tomorrow. So I just want to give the principals a heads up before I send that out. The other thing that Robin and I have been doing that's right out of the HR part of the strategic plan under organizational effectiveness is that I shared with the board that I do intend to cease being a superintendent at some point in the future. And when I depart, I promised the board that I would leave you in good hands, that we'd have a succession plan that would help move us, preserve the good work that's being done and provide some continuity. Part of that is that I've been interviewing, or Robin and I have been interviewing all of our administrators at the building level, and we've been sitting down with our central office administrators as well, going through their career aspirations and timelines, their needs for professional development, areas that they perceive as strengths and areas that they perceive that they have room for growth. And then we're also asking them in those same conversations to identify people within their departments or schools who they think have leadership potential. And the intent there is that Robin and I are going to start to conduct some professional development of our own for those people who are potentially interested in being administrators. And so the idea would be to start to build a ready bench of people who are interested in leadership. And we have a lot of great people doing wonderful things. There's a teacher here tonight who's been taking on a lot of work in her sabbatical. Each of the principals have identified anywhere from 2 to 6 people that they think have leadership potential. And sometimes just pulling them aside and saying, hey, you're doing a great job. Have you ever thought about being an administrator? And I try to do that informally. We're now trying to do that formally. So those meetings have been going great. They're sort of open-ended conversations. It's not, I don't have like a template that I'm using or anything, but I'm documenting all of those elements that I described to you, and so I have it, and then Robin and I can kind of go through and say, hey, this person might be really good for this. So I'm happy with that work so far. Another thing that has to do with sort of on the same theme of smooth transitions, I've been meeting bi-weekly with our HR and business office in anticipation of Jamie's departure. We're working through, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of workflows and what belongs in payroll, what belongs in HR. The meetings are great. There's a lot to get through. We have this laundry list of tasks. We're about halfway through it right now, and we continue to meet every other week on that. Another big part of student support was updating and improving our security, our safety responses. We've been working I'd say monthly. We're doing something. The SAU staff has updated its own emergency response plan. And we had a meeting just maybe not even a month ago, certainly since our last SAU meeting, with the chief of police in Norwich and Lieutenant Ufford from the Hanover Police Department to work on reunification. So something happened. We had a natural disaster or some sort of violent event that required us to evacuate the schools. The reunification process is usually really fraught. It's dangerous. You have parents that will just like appear at schools in the aftermath of some event. And there's a science to actually reuniting kids with their parents. And so we did a walkthrough of a facility that I won't share publicly that we anticipate using for reunification, to scope it out for capacity and flow and all those considerations that you have to have. And then fortunately for us, we use this method now called the standard response protocol to call things like lockdowns or evacuations, that sort of thing. And that group that developed that had a big training at the VA. And we brought a team of about 8 people from the SAU, each of the building principals, myself, Karen Wright, who's our public information officer in those events, and both police chiefs, and went to all-day training at the VA on reunification. So we feel like we're making strides. And now in March, we've scheduled a tabletop exercise that'll be many hours of us simulating an event and in responding. So I feel like we're really in a good place. Between upgrades we've done to building access and this training, I feel better prepared than we were. And then I just mentioned about the leadership team extending the strategic plan. And then I guess the other thing of interest is that, I don't know if this is considered community outreach, but I've been, in fact, Neil and I have been on these meetings, Garrett, I think you too, with Rebecca Holcomb and Jim Maslin, our representatives on the Vermont side, around Governor Scott's proposals for consolidating down to 5 school districts. And I had shared during one of those meetings my experience in Erie of consolidating our district from 23 schools down to 18. And it was a really scientific process that the community was completely engaged in and we were completely transparent about. And we closed schools and had people in the neighborhood clapping, like giving us a round of applause at the end of it, because we had taken them through this very open process, like for a year. And so I ended up getting invited to speak to the House Education Committee and shared that plan with them. It's a 300 slide deck. Interesting, there's just not been much data used in determining that plan. And so made the suggestion that maybe we got to look at some data. And it seems to be gaining traction. So hopefully we will get some data and there won't be any rash decisions made about the number of districts.
Strategic plan.
Right. So that's it. So I guess that's what I have to tell you about the strategic plan now. And I really do feel confident we're making big strides, and Robin in her report will lay out for you what's been going on in the curriculum world, which is a big chunk of the plan too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions for Jay on either the capital improvement plan or the strategic plan at this point? Thanks. Yeah.
I just want to say, I really appreciate the effort you're putting into this session. It's a really fraught time for an organization when leadership transitions occur. Also, I just have to editorialize for 1 second. To say that it's hard to imagine Jamie retired. We bumped into each other at the Mobile in West Lebanon. I'm confident we had the most enthusiastic education finance conversation ever at a gas station. Their patrons were wondering what was going on over there in the aisle. So she is still heavily engaged all the way to the end here. So good for Jamie.
Thanks, Michael. Any other questions or comments on this item? Nothing online? Yeah, okay. All right, now we will move on to business requiring action. And I think we can take a motion for B through D and then we'll pull out the policy piece.
I move to approve items B, C, and D by consent.
Is there a second? Lily, thank you. So it's motion by Deb, second by Lily. Do we have anyone online? No? Okay, all in favor? Brilliant. Any opposed? Okay, so that was unanimous. For the policies, I think we are just approving the sustainability policy this evening.
I can follow that one, yes.
Okay,
Amendment language.
okay.
Move to approve policy AE after repositioning the 2 paragraphs defining sustainability in that policy into a separate section titled definitions.
Second.
So, motion by Ben, second by Deb. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, perfect. That was unanimous again. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to the policy committee as always. Moving on to reports. I will just report that we have a lot of meetings this week. Thank you all in advance for your cheerful attendance at those. We have our Dresden meeting tomorrow night and then our annual meetings on the 27th in the HHS auditorium for Hanover and Dresden. I apologize, I do not know when the Norwich meeting is happening. It's later, right?
Oh, town meeting, Norwich town meeting is Monday night.
Monday night.
The
Okay.
informational hearing.
Sorry.
Informational hearing is Monday night for Norwich. Yes.
And following the Dresden meeting, we would like to thank members of the board who are rolling off and will be gathering at Sawtooth Kitchen at Native Reservation.
Thank you. So nice for doing that.
That was the easy part.
Yeah, good job, reservation making. Yes, and so we will, the vote is March 4th, thank you. And following that, we will have our organizational meetings March 11th with our new board. At that point, we will be saying goodbye to Tony and to Lily, right? Is that it for this time around? Hopefully, okay. So thank you both very much. I know that your individual boards are doing tearful goodbyes, so we'll save that for those meetings. Committee reports, yes.
I would just say on that, while I'm here tonight, obviously, and I'll be here tomorrow, I have my own board meeting for work Thursday. So I'll not be around for that.
So noted. Were you presenting?
I don't believe so.
Okay. We'll get to that.
I only need a few minutes.
You are not presenting as a. Okay, perfect. Yes.
And if anyone needs an absentee ballot, 'cause they'll be out of town on Tuesday, talk to Ryan.
Is that still possible? That's the deadline for that.
I believe it's possible.
I think there's still time.
Yeah.
I don't know about New Hampshire, but in Vermont, you can just come to my office and pick up an
I'm sorry,
absentee
yeah,
ballot
Hanover
for the
residents.
Dresden
Talk to Ryan.
ballot.
Okay, good to know. All right, committee reports.
Back out.
Seeing none, we will move on to Assistant Superintendent's report.
This virtually.
Robin, thanks for being here.
Sure, I'm happy to be here. I did submit my report, but I wanted to point out at our last meeting, Kim asked about the title grants and the funding that we received from the federal government. So I did include that in this report and I'll include it in our other district reports, but it gives you an idea of what we currently receive from the federal government. And that has been declining each year since I've been here, but it still is about $170,000 total for all of the districts. So it's something, we'll pay attention to. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
And at this point, that funding is not affected, is that correct? That's my
That's
understanding.
correct, right?
And the emails I get at Dartmouth, so, okay. Other questions? Yep.
Having not paid attention, I'm just curious in like 30 seconds or less, could somebody that knows what the circumstances are around legislation to remove the SAU 67 superintendent?
That was,
Oh, I know, but what was the issue that led to possible legislation?
The bow soccer.
Yeah.
yes, it was the transgender
Okay,
issue with the parents.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So many full circle moments in this meeting. Okay, any other questions for Robin? All right, seeing none.
Actually, Robin, sorry, I have one question. It actually just came through today. The start time. So is that a committee that's going on over in New Hampshire for the school start times? Just because every once in a while I hear it, and I got another email today from a parent in Norris just asking about if anyone's ever going to look into school start times moving a little later. And I said, well, one of my fellows, Ben here, has been proposing this for decades, but so this is a committee, right? Is that what's
Yes, it's
happening?
a committee, and it's not specified whether it's start of the school year start times, whether it's the start time in terms of the hour, anything like that. It's pretty wide open right now. So I'll keep you posted when I hear more about that committee.
Oh, wow. Okay. I thought it was the school day start time. So
No, they haven't even specified.
All right.
As somebody who's been here a while, this board, not this board, I believe it was the Dresden board, already previously entertained this idea of changing the school day start time. And concluded that it just was not, it wasn't financially feasible, and there were other logistical reasons that made it.
And it meant extra bus runs, which I will just point out is not in alignment with our sustainability initiatives either. So, yeah, there were a lot of issues with that.
I will say though, that it keeps coming back up at council. It's a horse that doesn't want to leave the stable.
Yeah.
To use the metaphor, but they want it to.
I say it only because I'm not trying to discourage yet another committee. I'm merely saying that if another committee were to form, there is past work that's been done on this.
Right. And it's been done at so many schools in the state too.
And other states as well.
Mhm.
And what year that was?
I was on the board.
I was not between 5 and 9 years.
Time in the last 10 years, yes, yeah.
Might have been my first year, first or second.
Yeah, mine have, or coming off, yeah.
David Sobel was the chair.
Yeah. Anything else for Robin? Robin, thank you so much for being here. We'll move on to business administrator.
You're welcome.
I only have a couple things. One is the audit report. We received the draft last Thursday, so that's being reviewed now. And Jamie is currently working on the management discussion and analysis report and everything else that will have to be submitted before they'll do the final and everything else. The other thing is, I guess the next meeting, March 11th, we'll do the year-to-date on the financial report, submit one of those. And then the last thing is Lyme. So it's public notice now and everything else that Lyme decided not to contract with us for the financial services. So that will not be part of us moving forward.
Interesting. Okay.
It was just something that they just financially could not sustain.
Okay. Might perhaps at some point want an update on that. I don't know. I'm looking around at the board.
Jamie has me contacting their superintendent.
Okay, so I will just suggest that at some point, whether it's appropriate for public or non-public, I'll let you guys determine. But I think it would be good to get an update on sort of that process. Okay. Any questions for Teresa? All right, thank you very much, Teresa. I don't believe we need a non-public tonight, looking around to confirm. Okay, so with that, I will take return to public session. I mean, not return to public session, public comment, last opportunity for public comments. Okay.
But I have a question.
We're not a member of the public, Eric. No, I'm just kidding. You can speak.
Based on what Teresa just said, because is part of, excuse my lack of memory here, but is part of the SAU budget or that we've added a FTE that was supposed to basically be part of this income, so are we still,
It was contingent.
it was offsetting?
Yeah.
So,
We're still gonna add the FTE, but we no longer,
no,
No, we're not.
no.
it was contingent.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I will take a motion to adjourn. Really? That's my last one here, so, adjourn at 7:29 PM.
Seconded by Tony, right?
Second, seconded by Tony, seconded by Michael on behalf of Tony. And I will take a roll call vote, starting with Neil.
Odell, yes.
Asst, yes.
Carmen, yes.
Yes.
McConnell, yes.
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 Nelson, yes.
Sarah, yes.
Thank you, everyone. Last SAU meeting.